Welcome, everyone. This is the long-awaited part two with Candice Christiansen, who is, I just flat out call her the expert on neurodivergence and sex addiction. She has really honed in on this arena, and we refer people to her to get some clinical consultation to identify. It's good to know so you can create a map of, what you are dealing with. It's like you go to the doctor and you get a diagnosis, and then you know how to address things. And so, I look at these labels not as a shame thing. I really look at them as an opportunity, and I really appreciate Candace's sharing on this topic and helping us all be able to identify, opportunities for, growth and how to navigate the space. So, Candice Christensen, it has a practice. Namaste. I will put a link to her information in the chat for those of you that are joining us. If you have questions about this specifically or would like to work with her outside of that. So, but Candace, our first question, and you can see them in the Q&A. Oh, could you please post the link in the chat? And Candace, would it be possible to highlight bullet point style some of the key takeaways from the lecture you folks haven't seen?
Sure.
Maybe, I don't, yeah, but you probably know it by heart. So yeah, but I will, yes.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and get started. Thanks so much, Tammy, and thanks to Sila. I really appreciate the collaboration and the referrals from Seeking Integrity all the time and your trust and faith in me with clients. So thank you. And hi, everybody. Autism is a neuroculture. So let's start there. If we're just looking at bullet points from my PowerPoint, I like to explain to individuals and couples that autism is a neurodevelopmental difference. It's not a deficiency. It's not even, I don't look at it even as a divergence from some norm. I look at it as a neuroculture because if the way I see and believe and perceive and understand the world is unique to my brain, and that's different from Tammy's neuroculture of her neurotype, then that is okay. It's a difference. I liken it to my partner, Chris. Chris is Dakota, so Native American and Japanese. And so he comes from a different culture, different cultures than I do. And we honor and respect the way that we communicate and our heritage, et cetera, our lineage that's different. And so again, as an autistic person, we are sensory sensitive to our environment. We are also very sensitive to the emotions and the energy of other people all around us. So if you imagine a child at school with bright lights, fluorescent lights, lots of noise, lots of change, lots going on, certain smells, textures, creates a lot of sensitivity and a lot of discomfort. And then as you grow up and you start to look at like friendships and everything is very nuanced, but in the autism neuroculture, we speak very directly. We ask direct questions. We're very honest. Now, I'm not talking about a sophisticated addiction because there is a dishonesty that comes with that. But there is this bluntness. There is typically a different way of communicating. And so there can be a struggle to understand relationships and friendships. And so what happens for folks that end up with problematic sex is they feel very safe in transactional acting out. So sex that's transactional. I pay you, you do this. I go on this site, I have this experience. I don't have it's predictable. I don't have the pressures of giving eye contact or trying to figure out foreplay or, oh, I have to talk or say something. So oftentimes for folks, in fact, most of the time, the folks that we work with that are autistic, they do end up having transactional sexual acting out. And so recovery looks like really working with people to understand where are you in fight or flight. We've got to get help you learn to regulate your anxiety and your sensory sensitivities. Also helping you to understand what your level of empathy is, because there's 4 types of empathy, not just cognitive. There's somatic, compassionate, and responsive. And then also really understanding healthy boundaries, because a lot of times autistic people are fawning, trying to figure out, trying to fit in, so don't really understand healthy boundaries. So really needing to look at what are your boundaries, non-sexually and sexually. So that was the quickest bullet point ever of my presentation. So thank you for letting me share that. Let me look at, okay.
Yeah, and I did put the link. It took me a minute, but I did find the link for that specific webinar. So it is in the chat on this,
Yes.
so that you can go back and watch that as well. And I really appreciate that you talk about a culture. And so I will I will fess up, after Candace did the last one in February, I wrote her and I said, oh my gosh, it's like, you read all this stuff and you go, me too. And rather than going, oh, heck no, she goes, well, then welcome to welcome to
Go
the,
try.
and I was
Yeah.
like, and it like that level of acceptance of like, okay, and that was a shift for me, and it was really an opportunity. So I appreciated it, even though I think I was absolutely looking for of course, everybody does that. So, okay. So the next question is, I
Yeah.
am
Yep.
betrayed. My spouse had a psychological test that revealed an avoidant personality disorder. They were checking for autism as well. They said he doesn't meet the DSM criteria for autism, even though he has traits. Could you please elaborate on what this may mean specifically to sex addiction and avoidance in dealing with the damage that this has done? We are 6 weeks post-disclosure and polygraph, and he has been extremely avoidant, virtually no contact since.
Okay, well, I just am sending you so much compassion first. I want to say that, especially being 6 weeks post-disclosure and again having the castle crumble and yeah, truly. So coming from a compassionate space of talking about elaborating on what this may mean specifically related to sex addiction and avoidance. You're talking about someone, your partner who's diagnosed with avoidant personality disorder. Whereas with autism, I think here's the struggle. So I want to just say something before I go further into answering your question. Unless a neuropsychologist or a psychologist or a licensed clinician that's an autism specialist is really well versed in understanding what autism looks like in adults, there can be a misdiagnosis or an undiagnosis or a different diagnosis that's given. So I always like to look at myself and my colleague Ali Dearborn created an autism screening tool that really looks at a lot of what isn't in the diagnostic criteria that looking at the research so many autistic people describe as their traits that are common for autistic adults, right? But we learned to mask. And so I will say that avoidance, if we look at anxious avoidant attachment styles, can be really common. I know I used to think I was preoccupied as an autistic ADHD human, but what I've realized is I'm actually an anxious avoidant type. And so what does that mean? It means conflict is very anxiety provoking, not like really, really struggling with communication at times. If my form of communication and connection is different, and it causes me a lot of anxiety, or I'm afraid that I'm going to be rejected because rejection sensitivity dysphoria it's a legitimate issue for a lot of autistic people, then it makes sense to me. I'm not justifying or condoning, but it makes sense to me if your partner struggles with that, like fear of rejection, fear of judgment, not really like afraid of how's the conversation going to go? Yeah, I want us to connect, and he's basically avoiding. That makes sense to me. And what needs to be worked through with that is naming that, and then also working through his shame around that. You said post-disclosure, yeah, virtually no contact. So I want to just validate that that's a problem. That's a problem. And feel free to reach out to me. Like if I do a lot of consultations with people where they just need a little bit of guidance because the partner that's avoidant doesn't understand the impact on the betrayed partner. They're just looking at it through their lens of fear of rejection and really, and fear of what's going to come up, and a lot of shame, and not understanding that it's the avoidance that's also perpetuating your pain and your trauma. So I hope that helps.
And I just put Candace's, you can reach out to her on that. But I'm curious, so this is a curious like after, like with a formal therapeutic disclosure, there's usually a process, and I'm curious what the plan was for each and both of you afterwards with your qualified professionals while you're doing that. And I'm also curious, if you've reached back out through yours to his, so that the two therapists that worked with you could possibly bring you back, into the room and, talk about what's going on for you. I'm with Candace, like big virtual hug. It's got to be so painful. And, because yes, you just got a whole bunch of stuff dumped on you and now you're sitting there going, well, now what? But also like, to me, it would be, what is the plan, and the professionals should, I hope, be able to help you navigate this, this really rough spot.
Yeah, definitely a rough spot there. Thank you for adding that. Typically after there's the impact letter and there's definitely follow-up. So, yeah, so complex and truly, truly like just intimate betrayal. And I call it intimate betrayal violence as well, is just very, very complex. So let's go to the next question, Tammy.
Well, but I think tagging us, the very bottom one, my therapist
Oh,
says he treats me like shit. She isn't hopeful. So I think that's tagging onto the first one.
oh, mhm.
So, so,
Yeah,
we did a whole different series on should I say or should I go. I'm gonna go pull the link for that while
I
we
do.
look at the
Thank you,
next one.
Tammy.
Betrayed,
Yeah.
neurodivergent here. How can I respond to my SAPA when he uses language regarding my sensitivities in an antagonistic way? Example, you're just being sensitive.
So I have a workbook coming out finally for neurodiverse couples on autism, sex, love, communication, and I have a whole section on intimate betrayal violence as well as porn and sex addiction when we're looking at autism. So I just want to say that it should be out before the end of the year. And I will, for this question, it will go into more detail. Here's the thing, there has to be education for with your partner around your neurological difference, because it's not about just being sensitive. I mean, we are part of our neuroculture is that we are highly sensitive human beings, and it's not so, but that's a microaggression. And so I would name that. I mean, that's literally a microaggression. So it's an insult. You're just being sensitive. It's like saying when I've had family members that would say you're just being too dramatic. And in reality, I'm an autistic female identified human that wasn't being too dramatic. I was calling out and like feeling things really strongly in my environment that was crazy. And I was getting in trouble for that. So I would name it. I would name it. This is my neurotype. I'm a highly sensitive person. That's actually part of being autistic. It's also part of being ADHD. And so, partner, when you say that, it's insulting to me and it's offensive. So stop. If you'd like to get educated on more about my autism, we can find some books, podcasts, etc. There's plenty out there, but that's what I would do. I just name it.
Well, and it's also like pathologizing being sensitive. It's like, oh,
Mhm.
that's a bad thing. Like, how did, being sensitive and caring and whatever, end up being a bad thing? It's so minimizing, from
Mhm.
that standpoint as well. I often, like this is in the weeds, and I get it, but it's also, what is the goal of the relationship? If the goal of the relationship is to have you move towards each other, every time something like this happens, it moves, it's a step back. So that's a conversation, perhaps, to have the two of you of like, is our goal, to basically name call, you're too sensitive, or is it to, how can we navigate this space, this relationship, so that we're, coming together, really seeing each other, that's the best, healthiest relationship you can possibly have. We're individually better, healthier, happier, if we're in those kind of, healthy paired relationships. Why would we not want that for ourselves as
Yeah.
well as the relationship? I like to reframe things rather than as issues, as opportunities, because then I've got a goal to work on, a positive one, rather than just a whole bag of problems. So,
Yeah. Well, and I want to say one more thing, because
uh-huh.
if he's using it to minimize his betrayal and his behaviors, that's also not okay. And so
Right.
that's gaslighting and it's abusive. And, I think we've just gotten over here at Namaste Center for Healing where we're calling it that. You're experiencing betrayal, trauma, violence when someone is engaging in abusive verbal behavior and emotional manipulation by saying, oh, you're just being sensitive. It's like, well, no, there's been a betrayal that he's caused or she's caused or they've caused, right? And so your partner's caused the betrayal. That's not about you being too sensitive. Of course, you're going to have a traumatic response. We know in the research, there's literally either acute traumatic stress because it's still happening, which might be your case, or post-traumatic stress. But I say acute because so many of the partners are still in it, like you're describing. And so it's traumatic. It's currently traumatic. It's not post-traumatic. It's currently traumatic. So that also needs to be addressed in couples.
Yes, and you did not state that it was directly related to the acting out behavior, which it could be, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is kind of permeating everything. Like you're too sensitive about anything, you know. But that is a massive ability to deflect. Oh, it's not about me and my behaviors. You're just too sensitive. So blame shifting for sure. Okay, when he says things like you're just being sensitive, it not only minimizes his betrayal and behaviors, but also judges and stigmatizes me, you know.
Yep.
Yeah, yes, it's different to own I have these sensitivities and that
Mhm.
that's not a problem. Those are just this is how I'm navigating the world versus the way you're doing it is wrong. And
Mhm.
I'm sorry, from an addict perspective, like when we're in active addiction, there's nothing that we have integrity about. We're lying to ourselves or lying to everyone else. So it's not like we have, you know, figured life out, you know, from that standpoint. So this, you know, this feels like I'm protecting myself by making you the problem. So, okay.
Yeah, this next one's a really good one.
Yeah. What to do when my autistic husband's therapist uses his autism as an excuse? Things like he can't finish disclosure because it's too distressing to him, or answering your questions dysregulates him, etc., instead of figuring out how to get him to do recovery with the neuro differences. Husband now uses it as an excuse too. I'm likely autistic as well, but not formally diagnosed. This is a great question.
A great
They're all
question.
great questions, but yeah,
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 yeah.
that's a
Welcome to
complex
the Neuro
situation.
Tribe if you're
Yeah,
autistic
yeah.
as well. So welcome, welcome. All of our neurotypes are welcome here. Sounds like the therapist needs to get some education around autism. And this is why I'm such a strong advocate and finally was able to say I've got to get a book out with all my PowerPoints and everything just compiled because autism, being autistic, me as an autistic person that works with 100% autistic ADHD adults, it's not a license for us to fill in the blank, be an asshole, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And so, and I want to validate that, yeah, if he's struggling to finish disclosure because it's too distressing, then it sounds like the therapist needs to work with him, like I talked about in the beginning, on autonomic nervous system regulation and shame reduction so that he is able to finish his disclosure. All of our autistic clients have been able to complete their disclosure. Now, if he moves into being suicidal, which we have had clients end up like legitimately at risk for that, then obviously that process needs to be slowed down. But it sounds like your husband needs to be working with an autism specialist that's a CSAT, or the therapist needs to get some consultation so that he can help with the tools that your autistic partner needs in order to finish the disclosure. And then yeah, there are definitely ways to support him in being regulated so that you can ask the questions that you need to. And I always say this is an IFIO, which is IFS for couples saying that we use, but slower is faster when we're doing couples recovery work. Slower is faster. And so if you're together and, you know, whether it's conjoint couples or couple session and he is getting dysregulated, you just slow things way down. Things just need to be slowed down. They're, you know, what's going on in his body, okay, is it he? Okay. I don't want to misgender anybody. So, what's going on in your body, like somatically, just to really check in so that he can answer your questions. So his therapist needs some education He's got to learn how to get regulated, which is 101 when we're working with autistic people. We have low level emotional dysregulation, anxiety, because the world is very unpredictable. It causes us constant stress. So regulation is key so that he can answer your questions so that you can feel compassionately supported, which is what you deserve.
Yeah, and I, I have so many thoughts, but one of them is how disempowering for your husband that, oh, you will never be successful doing those things. You know, we have lots of clients. I remember I was doing a group with, it doesn't matter, but one of the guys said, I have ADHD, and he did. He had, he was on the more extreme, version of it. And it was like, so I can't do this. And I was like, oh, it's not an excuse. It's just like an additional thing. There are so many, I mean, I've got post-it notes. I should have owned, some stock in 3M, but, I use post-it notes. I have reminders on my calendar. I have all of the things set up to help me be successful with this,
Yeah.
mild ADHD, but I still have it, and it does not mean that I get a pass. Oh, that's too hard. And it's also like that therapist, and if you're hearing it from the therapist, I always wonder if I'm really, is the therapist really saying this, or are you hearing it, through your husband who is, and you may be hearing it from the therapist, but it's one of those things where, that is telling you that the relationship is not important, that only his inability to do things is, what the focus needs to be. And you've waited long enough. I mean, honestly, and yeah, we talk about slow everything down, but there's ways to go, okay, I'm feeling dysregulated. We can co-regulate. Like we will learn to co-regulate. You know what? That's a relationship building thing of like, okay, we're going to talk about this difficult thing, feel it. Okay, we're going to co-regulate, and then we're going to keep pressing on. And then you know what? It's empowering because you go, wow, we navigated that. We didn't just throw in the towel and go, no, that's too hard. Addiction is everything is too hard. I need to escape into this because I don't do life well. And so recovery is the opposite. We learn to do things that are challenging. We will not always feel comfortable. If we're dysregulated, it's an opportunity to regulate, but it isn't, a hard pass on everything. So, and if you need to talk about things, with a safe therapist, one who gets these things, you know, that may be, another alternative too. But, and I'm sorry, and I also hear that you may be in the tribe as well. So again, your needs are being
Mhm.
missed, unmet because him, the addict, is getting all the prioritization. So completely out of balance. And I'm so glad you're here asking questions. And I hope, you're seeing, okay, here's some steps that, I can do that will be helpful for you in navigating this. So we need more questions, people. We've got time. So while we've got a moment, tell me about this book. When are you, is this to therapists? Is this to the
It's
professional
to
people? Oh,
everyone.
to everyone.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's geared towards everyone. So therapists, educators, life coaches, consultants, partners,
Okay.
whether autistic or not, as well as autistic humans. And it's something that we're in the first stages of edits right now, and there's like a few rounds of it. But
Yes.
from what I understand with the editing, that our editors, it's hopefully, I'm hoping by like October. So
Oh, wow.
it's
Great.
around, yeah, it's really around what we're talking about because there's nothing out there. So there's a lot of misinformation, and I get asked to present and consult so much. So I just want something in one spot so I can say, go to this chapter,
Yeah.
right? You can
Yeah.
refer to this chapter. And I just want to say how much I appreciate coming on to these Q&As or presenting webinars, because when we're editing, it gives me more ideas like, oh, I've got to make sure I add this, right?
Hmm.
So I also think it's important to make sure that, well, betrayal trauma isn't talked about when we look at neurologically different folks. Um, Really, it's just not autism. It's like sex isn't talked about. Usually it's just autism, and then there's a lot of assumptions and stereotypes. So I've really taken great effort to make sure that the section on that intimate betrayal trauma really is very supportive and compassionate to the betrayed partner, as much as I'm being supportive and compassionate to the autistic neurotype. the person with the autistic neurotype, if that makes sense. So
Yes, it does. And in this last example, the partner was it was possibly identifying as that. So is that going to be included in the book
yes.
as well of
Yeah.
like the partner also? Okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay.
Yeah. Whether it's like one person is autistic in the relationship, one's not, or both are. Oh, here we've got more of this.
Yes.
Great. Yeah.
But
I'm
continue your
really trying
sentence.
to address all of it.
Yeah, it's going to
And
be
I,
this
in
thick
my,
of a book. So
yeah, and in my acknowledgments, I give a shout out to Sila. And
oh,
so
good. Thank you.
I quote Dr. Rob a couple
Oh,
times too. And so I'll be reaching out to him to talk about, just to have a conversation about it too.
oh, great. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
we will obviously share the information
Yeah.
with everyone too. Okay, so the next one is ADHD partner hasn't acted out and feels he's not an addict and says getting more emotional connection is via physical, sexual, but I'm triggered. I feel stuck. I believe he's sober, but not feeling compassion in the situation, afraid to lose him. I'm dysregulated big time.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So just sending you so much compassion, Nicole, with the dysregulation, and um sounds like he's not having compassion for you. Let's see. Um, I wonder if you could ask a question with this. You're feeling stuck. He's not acting out, doesn't think he's a full-blown addict. He's sober from something. So I'm guessing sexual behavior, but I'm wondering if you could give me just a little more information just to be able to support you at this time, because I get that you can feel stuck, but is there a question?
Yeah, this is what I'm reading, and we'd love your input on this. Is I hear somebody who is going, I'm not really an addict, and the only way I connect is with physical and sex, which, like, but we tell partners all the time, Dr. Rob, I'll quote Dr. Rob, do you want to have sex with somebody you don't trust? And
Mm.
abstinence is just not acting out, sobriety is I'm starting to do things differently. He wants physical sexual needs, and their needs is, you know,
Yeah, I can
I
hear
always,
that.
I always, I need this, and I'm like, well, yeah, do you need
Um,
this? So, but
yeah, I think sometimes what can be misunderstood, and thanks for giving me a little more information. I love what Tammy, you just said as well. Here's the thing, we know with ADHD brains and autistic brains, there's lower levels of dopamine. This is why when we're looking at these neurological differences, we're looking at dopamine seeking behavior. The challenge for oftentimes though, with ADHD and autistic individuals is that dopamine seeking, there can be this, it can feel safer for perhaps to connect physically and sexually because it's more predictable, meaning, okay, I have learned enough that your partner might say that I just do this and then we have sex, and there doesn't need to be foreplay, there doesn't have to be a lot of talking, there doesn't have to be, but what you're saying is, no, that's actually the way I connect. I need that. I need to feel safe. I'm feeling really dysregulated. You also are afraid to lose him. And so my guess is there's this, if I don't have sex or meet his needs. But the reality is a healthy relationship, you're meeting each other in the middle. And so um there's got to be a way where the two of you can compromise so that it's not just about meeting his physical needs, because that feels problematic to me. It feels problematic to me if you're experiencing what he's doing as perhaps addictive behavior. You might not be, but he doesn't see himself as an addict. And so then it just feels like you're being put in a position where he's making you part of his cycle. I'm curious about that, where he hasn't acted out. He feels he's not an addict. You feel stuck. I believe he's sober, which tells me there has perhaps been acting out that you're not okay with. And therefore, this feels like one big excuse of it feels too scary, maybe to emotionally connect for him. And remember, ADHD folks have rejection sensitivity. I would look that up, really research that. It's a physiological trauma response. And so it makes sense to me that he's wanting to connect physically, but I'm not condoning that. I'm just saying that it's not meeting your needs. So there has to be a meet in the middle, which my solution, if he was in front of me, if you were in front of me, would be, what are you afraid would happen if instead of being physical with Nicole, you were emotionally connected. And what does that look like? Right? My guess is we would get to the fear of, which would be she might reject me. I don't know how to do it. It feels too overwhelming. Emotions are really big. ADHD and autistic folks can struggle a lot of times with big emotions. It can really overwhelm us. We have very sensitive systems. And so that's what needs to be looked at if he's willing to even go to couples therapy.
And Dr. Rob, I'll quote him again. He did, as part of a webinar, he looked up um, intimacy, and the top 15 terms, none of them had sex in it. So real intimacy is connecting and being vulnerable. And yes, for addicts, and I know he doesn't believe he's an addict, but yeah, I don't know how to do emotions. I don't know how to connect. Fear of vulnerability. It's the come here, go away, come here, go away. Like all of that is challenging. And particularly if he's in denial about there's a problem. You know what? If there's not a problem, then there isn't a solution. Like the good thing about identifying as an addict is here's some things that you can do that will move out of the stuck place. If he's in there isn't a problem, but you're going, yes, there is a problem, it doesn't, shoving it in the closet and going like, well, I'm not acting out. I often say abstinence is just not doing the things we weren't supposed to be doing in the first place. We don't get a gold star for that. We have to learn to do things differently. So I hope we have so many resources. I did put in the chat for the podcast. Dr. Robin, Dr. Stan Tatkin, who is amazing, did a podcast back in January of 2019. I share it often, called We Do. And, I do this a lot. Here you are individually. If the goal is to have a healthy relationship, how do you move towards each other because you're individually healthier, happier, all of those good things. In an unhealthy relationship, you're honestly, like the research is, you're better not in the relationship. So we have lots of motivation to move towards each other, if we're willing to do the work. But him sticking his head in the sand and just going like, nope, not a problem, isn't going to help either of you move towards each other. Okay, Candace, the next one
So
is,
helpful.
what is the best way to reach out to an autistic person or one with traits in order to inform them that there needs to be communication and turning into the discomfort instead of turning out and avoiding? This is so very distressing, and I'm looking into legal separation or divorce. Thank you for this question. That's a great question. Like, because it isn't just like your intimate partner, it's like,
Mhm.
how do we connect with people?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, so what I'm getting is that perhaps you are in a situation with someone in a relationship where you're looking at divorce because they won't lean into their discomfort. They continue to avoid. And this is where an intervention, if they're open, can be done, where we end up seeing and people end up reaching out to me and our team. A lot of times when they've tried all these different things and it because of neurology, it's like the treatment and the support hasn't been accurate. And so my response to you is, would you and your partner be willing to get on a phone call where a third party could be able just to name some things going on with his neurotype or your partner's neurotype? I don't want to assume them. And talk about like why that is, and maybe see if we can get to the underbelly of it in order to see if there's a willingness to lean into the discomfort at a slow pace, perhaps, but do it so that you don't have to move into separation or divorce. But this is really where I think there does need to be a third party, an objective person, a specialist who comes in to just really support the two of you in helping to name and explain autism, the discomfort, and how this person can lean into that and have it be in a way that doesn't overwhelm their system and continue to further perhaps traumatize you with avoidance.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's so sad because this person may lose you
Mhm.
out of fear of interacting, and so really challenging. I'm so glad you're here and asking the question. Okay, how do you get someone who is on the spectrum beyond the transactional sex. He has been an addict for 55 years, and it felt very transactional. He appears to not be interested in connecting beyond sex.
Yeah, and so there needs to be, if I were working with this individual, I would first really want to do some education around, like, what have they hoped for by having transactional sex? What are they afraid would happen if they have something more vulnerable and intimate and real, like with their partner, right? So really going deeper into that. Oftentimes autistic folks will, like, there's a lot. I remember when I was on here last time and answering a question, and one of the partners asked, how do I get my partner to do foreplay? And so that actually ended up in the workbook, because the reality is his partner that's doing transaction may not understand or feel comfortable or know that there are actually other options. So they may just need some education around it. So there's things to do with that. But when it's delicate like this, that's where you need a skilled therapist that can really say, let's talk about this being transactional. And I would look at all the ways your relationship are transactional. Autistic people look at that because it's predictable, versus what would happen if it wasn't transactional. How do you define foreplay? You could ask him. And then, how do you define it? How does he define it? What would it look like to be more spontaneous? What does that even mean? Instead of having it look a certain way, what if it was switched up? What would that cause to have happen inside of him? Or what would come up for him? So they're just asking some of those questions. He appears to not be interested in connecting beyond the sex. I wonder if it's just really uncomfortable and foreign, completely foreign language based on his neuroculture and neuro language. So again, if there can be conversations around that where it's like, and even if you have to have the help of someone, I think that can really kind of make it so it's not all on you. The pressure's not all on you and he's not kind of getting defensive with you about it, but maybe having someone that can say, hey, I want to support the two of you, and really understanding like the difference between transactional and more like intimate, vulnerable, raw, spontaneous intimacy and all the things that are involved. I think that could be really helpful.
And I love that you're talking about, like, yeah, this feels like having someone, that can help navigate. And this goes back to what I said earlier about reframing, rather than this is a problem, this is an opportunity. How can we make this more connected? How can we make this a better thing? We don't have to accept that this is just how it is. We can be working on a mutual goal, that where it's the two of you, are in this together, so you talked about rejection sensitivity. It's like, because I'm not him obviously, but if it was like, what you're doing is wrong, if what you're doing is a problem and you've been doing it for 55 years, but it's an issue, like I wonder, like being curious, I wonder if we can work with somebody and look at this as like there's some opportunities and spice things, whatever, but is there opportunities rather than it's just it's a problem.
You just nailed it right there, Tammy. Thank you for saying that, because there's less fear of failure in a transaction because it's predictable. And so there is a lot of anxiety in going outside of routine schedules that, change. Again, our brains are really wired for that. What is predictable? And so if we don't have predictability, we will find ways to make it predictable, and it's not always healthy, but it doesn't mean that it's all lost, even at 55. I love how you said that, Tammy.
Yes, there's opportunities. I'm always like, I'm looking for options and opportunities to make things
Yes.
better. Autistic, betrayed partner having trouble with the ick post D-Day. Have you seen success working through this? And if so, how? I'm afraid I'll never want physical intimacy again.
Yeah, so we do internal family systems, use the internal family systems model. And so what I would do is first just welcome the ick. And if you have a therapist that you're working with, a trauma therapist that you feel safe with, to really lean into, if you feel like you can tolerate just really kind of envisioning and embodying in therapy that ick, instead of trying to push it away, that the ick that you're feeling is there for a reason. So it has a message for you. And it might be here saying ick, 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 ooh, 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 no, 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 because that's part of your healing, meaning I've got to feel it to heal it, lean into it so I can understand. And that might honestly be the valid, I'm going to use the word disgust that often comes up. There's so much that's entailed when there is intimate betrayal, including ick, disgust, anger, etc. And I think sometimes in our field, we kind of skip over what you're talking about, where it's like, no one's talking about getting to the healthier sex again. It's just like it stops because there's been betrayal. So I love that you're wanting to get through it. It's just, let's not ignore that the ick is here for a reason. And if you listen to what your body is communicating, the body keeps the score. There is trauma that's happened. And so that ick, just like anger deserves a seat at the table, your ick deserves a seat at the table. I hope that makes sense.
It does, and I'm curious, do you find journaling, useful is that something that
I think
helps in this?
journaling,
Okay.
yeah, and somatic work. I would, we do a lot of somatic IFS, so really breath work can be really great just to lean in, but you got to be willing to go there. Really, really be willing to go there, because the ick might bring up some serious like physical responsive ick. However, there is a way to heal that to where you can reclaim your own sexual desire and your own desire for sex and physical intimacy, where it's yours. You're empowered to have it be reclaimed and named the way you want and need it to be. But that ick is real valid. So you gotta lean into that in terms of just hear it out, feel it out. What is it trying to communicate to you? And if I had my guess, I could be wrong, is it's protecting you from something,
Yeah.
from being hurt again.
Yeah.
If we stay in ick, it's hoping to, if you were to journal,
Yeah.
let's just use
Yeah.
Tammy's example, journal, ick, okay, I'm connecting to the ick. Wow, it's in my stomach. What is the ick? Why is the ick here? What is it hoping to do for me? It's hoping that if I stay here, it's padding, it protects me from being hurt again, from the betrayal. It'll hurt less if my partner does it again. Okay, what is it afraid will happen if I'm intimate? Then you're going to be betrayed again, and then you'll be blindsided. You're going to feel love again for this person or connect, and then you're going to be completely hurt and blindsided. That's oftentimes why these feelings come up, to go, no, 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 to protect us. So we tend to befriend them, and then they soften, and then we can heal what's underneath.
And I'm hearing, because this was little ICK, and I'm hearing it could get to be all caps ICK that you have to move through. We have an internal family system drop-in group for betrayed partners on Wednesday morning, so
Great.
you're welcome to join that. There was something else that you said too that I was hopefully I'll remember it, but I don't remember. It doesn't matter. Okay, next question. Can you speak to the concept of autistic betrayed partners having a strong sense of justice and struggling to move past their partner's manipulation, lies, and betrayal? It feels like there's very little justice for betrayed partner. Saying sorry, acknowledging the harm, and changing behavior to what the betraying partner should have been doing all
Mm.
along still seems like justice for the harm that's been done, or it doesn't seem like justice for the harm that's been done to the betrayed partner. Additionally, how is it possible to trust again when logically there is every reason not to trust?
Yeah, so I love this question. Justice part is the autistic system, an autistic neurotype. We do believe in justice. So I hear that and just want to say, yeah, I really can feel this question very strongly. How is it possible to trust again when logically, that's another, right? Part of our autistic neurotype is that just, I cannot wrap my head around, this doesn't make sense to me. So that's the hardware portion. And I just really want to name that, if we look at it through, I hear the hardware talking, but a part as well, parts, and this may not gel for you. So just, you can leave it here if it doesn't gel, but there may be a part or parts of you that never get past it. And can we have both exist at the same time where, wow, you might choose to stay with this person, knowing that there will always be parts of you that say, I will never, ever trust you in regards to this ever again because of this. And that might be as far as you get. Now, you might get to a place where you say, I can't be in this relationship. And I honor that. Yeah, I honor that. And we have worked with autistic partners where you're right. Like there won't be any justice for this. Like there won't be. But I don't want that to be something that feels hopeless, because when people tune into it from a parts perspective, there can be parts that say, I'm going to hold this, and this feels like this part of me is going to hold on to that yeah, this part of me is not going to trust you because of this, but I can still have this life with you and raise the kids and do this up. I can see that I can maybe trust you with paying the bills, or I can see good in you in other ways. But over here, that's just done. We have had partners get there, and autistic betrayed partners as well.
And I put in the chat, the boundaries work group for partners started last night. Part of it is internal boundaries, and what I see for partners that are on this journey is you don't trust the betraying partner, and nor should you 100%. You know that they can betray you. If they're doing the work, the trust can be rebuilt, but not 100%. But for partners, I see them learning to trust themselves. They are stronger than they knew. They trust their internal, system, because they're going like, yeah, I'm not going to buy into those,
Yes.
manipulations and lies. So trust, it shifts, but you can be empowered in trusting yourself more, as
Yes.
you're doing the work. So, and yeah,
Well
none of
said.
this is logical. I mean, addiction isn't logical. It's
Mhm.
crazy brain stuff that, I say this to partners all the time. You will never understand how our brains work.
Mhm.
You would never do this stuff. You would just wouldn't. So trying to figure out the why, and like it will never make sense. If we come up with every single logical reason, to us, it still will never make sense. But in our brokenness, we do these things. They hurt you, they hurt us. It's just a hot mess. In recovery, we learn to do things differently. We can work on building trust and having integrity. But one of the things that I has helped for some people, and again, take what you need and leave the rest, but is, if you imagine your betraying partner as a kid under 10, say an 8-year-old, and there was something that was a deficit, it didn't get the emotional support, figured out a way to dissociate and to use this as a maladaptive coping mechanism. And it worked until it didn't. And now it's, hurt a whole bunch of people and everything else. But the good news is, with recovery, we can learn to do things different. We can be on a different path. So, but yeah, is it ever going to be fair? No, none of, I didn't ask to be an addict. No, I'm a grateful recovering addict, but I didn't ask to be an addict. You didn't ask to be a betrayed partner. None of us asked for this stuff. And this is what we have. So how do we best optimize what we are dealt with? I remember what I was going to say when you're talking about, hanging on to I'm hanging on to the ick so that I don't have to deal with it. But as part of looking at this, if I keep myself that safe, what am I missing out on too? There's a loss. If you hang on to that, you are also losing, connection. And,
Yes.
if we're in a relationship, if we love somebody, they can hurt us. If we don't care about them, they can't. But in a relationship, we can get hurt. But it's also, the meaningful part of life.
Yeah.
Okay, so then going back to the first questions with the sex, as
Mhm.
he says he develops emotional connection this way. And I'm going like, that is the lie he's telling himself,
Yeah.
connection. Yeah, that's, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
I,
not an emotional connection if you're not feeling emotionally connected. So,
it's a transaction. So
yeah.
yeah, that's where, Nicole, I really think working with someone that specializes in ADHD and sexual issues, so that there can be a conversation about that, because it sounds like your needs aren't being met. Um, Yeah.
Okay. The next question, how to get autistic sex addict spouse working on being emotionally sensitive to the betrayed partner, or is it not possible until they do that autonomic nervous
Yeah.
system work first? That seems like it could take a long time to undo and alter ANS. So,
Yeah, no, I would say I don't think it actually takes a long time. It takes a qualified professional who understands autism and sex addiction. Really, that's what it takes. And so it is possible. Like this is possible. And one of the things that I talk about a lot that will be in the workbook is scripts. Scripts are very helpful to an autistic person. And so if you as a couple can come up with scripts that help you or prompts for your partner so that they can show up in a more sensitive and empathic way that speaks to your system's needs, that can be helpful. I also want to say that this is where I do like to talk about the different types of empathy. The world says that empathy is cognitive empathy. I put myself in your shoes and I can feel your pain. For autistic people, we usually feel the other three. One is responsive empathy. How can I help you? What can I do? Because again, we go into, if I can do this, it'll ease their pain. It feels better. Um, or somatic empathy, which is I physiologically feel what you're feeling very strongly, but oftentimes autistic people will freeze. They have a freeze response. So your partner might be physically feeling what's happening, but they may not be able to connect because they freeze. So that needs to be named again in a therapy session, like pointed out, and then what comes up for your partner and worked through so that in real time, the two of you can work through that together with a therapist. Okay. And then compassion empathy is your partner may be feeling your emotions really strongly. I hear this from autistic individuals with sex addiction all the time where they say, yeah, I literally can feel her when she's crying. I feel the sadness so strong in my body, but I don't know what to do with it. And partners like, yeah, he'll stare at me. And then I'm like, I feel like they have no sensitivity, but it's just really about, okay, wait, helping your partner. And this is where a therapist would help. What's coming up for your partner, right? What is coming up for them? Can they connect on a deeper level? And when we typically work with a partner that is not showing emotions, is not showing empathy, and we tap them into their body, tears, crying, connection with their betrayed spouse. So this is where so many of the questions come back to working with someone that understands autism and ADHD. And I am going to apologize because that might be annoying for some if it's like, well, we don't have one, but even if you go back and say to your therapist, the couples therapist, this is what we're needing, or, seeking a consultation. We've done that before. We'll give you a consultation on it. Sometimes it's one phone call and couples are like lights going on. And then it's like, okay, they're off to the races in terms of this part of the recovery process.
yeah, because now there's a plan.
Yes.
We can do
Yes.
this,
Yes.
and so, and basically what you said probably, so the next couple are, I am willing, how do we do that? And it says, I'm talking about connecting on a relational level. So, and I'm kind of thinking it's get some help to get a plan so that you can execute the plan. Other things you would add to that? I'm sorry, I just accidentally hit the out.
I don't know.
Okay.
I know. I mean, I think, we do a lot of psychoeducation. We offer a lot of tools because an autistic ADHD system needs that. A lot of education. People need to know what is going on. So we offer that. So it's kind of in line with the plan that you're talking about. Psychoeducation is also helpful.
Are
Right.
autistic women drawn to sex work like stripping and prostitution?
Oh, that's a question that could take a little more time. It doesn't feel as clear let me just say a few things around that. Autistic females are at high risk for being victimized,
Mm,
sexually abused in domestic violent relationship and abusive
really?
relationships. Very, very high likelihood of being manipulated. And so There also in research shows that with, again, dopamine, some autistic individuals are hypersexual, right? And so this is a hard one for me though, because in the work I do, if I work with someone who ends up in that arena, they're highly traumatized and really need support around working with that trauma. And so I don't know that I can say are autistic women drawn to. I know that the women I work with are not drawn to it, but there might be autistic women out there that are drawn to sex work because maybe it feels more empowering, you know. But I'll speak to it from the trauma lens, which so many autistic females are have a high rate of being victimized. And so to me, they'd be vulnerable to getting drawn into that because they're too trusting and easily manipulated, unfortunately, by pimps.
Yeah. That was interesting question, and I did not know that about
Mhm.
domestic violence. So we have two more questions. Let's see if we can get through. Both of us are diagnosed autistic and have a trauma history. Beginning of disclosure here, 3 or 4 months out, 18 years of marriage. I have a greater sensitivity to touch and desire to connect, but our whole marriage, he felt dissociated from body and no emotion, no curiosity, very compartmentalized. Both of us have trauma history. He is dismissive avoidant. This triggers tons of my abandonment and betrayal from other family members. Is there any hope for him after physical sobriety and emotional awareness to eventually express himself through his body intimacy presence, even in a hug or kiss?
So yes, there's hope. This is one where we do 5-day intensives with couples, and in those 5 days, we can dive deep into this type of work. Yes, 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 it is absolutely possible. If you are both traumatized, if there's autism as a neurotype, this is absolutely a possibility to heal. But it does take more intensive work, we found, to accelerate your recovery and get there. And that is something that we do often. We do it weekly. We're literally booking our intensives into the end of October right now. We just have an approach that focuses on that right there.
So I put, in case you joined late, I put Candace's website. I also put Dr. Eddie Caparucci has, because you talked about your previous triggers, on September 22nd, he's doing a webinar, 90 minutes for partners. It does require prior registration, but it's on inner child for, you talked about your abandonment and things that could be useful. So consider that as well. Okay, so then the next and last question is, my partner is AUH, no, I don't even know, AU.
Oh, it's autistic ADHD.
Oh, thank
Audio,
you.
yeah.
Okay, level 1 plus ADHD, and we have a busy life, kids, animals, job, addiction, recovery, etc. Does he have the capacity to meet my emotional and physical needs in this marriage and betrayal repair? 4 years since the latest discovery, many over the past 20 years. Pre-betrayal, I needed very little, but now it's greater, and I feel him struggling to understand how to repair to get us back to baseline and build the foundation I and we need to have a new marriage. It feels like we won't get there.
So much compassion. This is something I definitely talk about, where the non-autistic partner is carrying a lot of the emotional and physical load, which I'm hearing. And so then there's a diagnosis, right? And so now that it's named, it's like the traits become exacerbated, which is pretty common. I do want to say that there is hope. You do need to have a new marriage. And it really is, I think, about starting to break some of this down, because in your busy, busy life, you also have this betrayal. So the castle's crumbled, the bombs have gone off. So you're in this like trying to recover in a burn unit, basically, after this horrifically traumatic event. All the while, you're going to work and you're taking care of the dogs, and you've got the kids. And so yeah, I need very little. That makes sense, but now it's greater, and I feel I'm struggling to understand how to repair to get us back on track. He's probably really overwhelmed, especially if he was recently diagnosed, and trying to understand it. But it's possible again, and I'm just apologizing because the answer is like, reach out to me and let's set up a consultation, because the reality is it is possible. It's just, there's got to be an explanation of, okay, this is what's happening with your ADHD. And then over here, we've got betrayal. And so with the hardware stuff, we've got this stuff, executive function, challenges that, right? And then you guys maybe need some plans and schedules, et cetera, around that. But around betrayal, there also needs to be this, which might need to be scheduling. Okay, we go to couples therapy every week and we focus on this, or every morning, this is where we're focusing on repair. Structure, schedules, routines will help his ADHD neurotype around betrayal recovery. But it's like carving out that time so that there is a focus on the two of you that's structured where there can be healing. Really quickly, what timing and recovery do you recommend
Yes, I was
intensive?
gonna ask you to answer that.
We work with a lot of people. I will say that we worked with a lot of people that have been to, like, we work with a lot of folks that come to us after seeking integrity. They go to a lot of different inpatient programs and they come to us. People that don't do an inpatient program, but they've been trying, maybe they've been in recovery for 6 months and they now want a neuro inclusive approach to recovery because it's accurate. We don't say it's a certain time. It's if it feels like a good fit for you and if it feels like a good fit for us. That's how we view it. We don't just take anyone because we may not be appropriate for everybody. But if it feels good to you, what we offer, and it fits for what we're, doing, if we feel like we're a good fit together, we will absolutely support you in coming to us. Would it be best to have both people in the marriage be tested for ADHD and autism? If you suspect, if your partner is, I think like attracts like. If you suspect, go get an assessment, but make sure that they specialize in adult autism and ADHD. Embrace_autism.com has self-tests, self-assessments that you can take, many, 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 many that you can take. You would take them with an assessor anyway. And so get on that embrace_autism.com and allow yourself to take the self-assessments if you're curious. There's many. Oh my gosh, thank you,
You
everybody.
did a great job. So thank you everyone for the questions. We so appreciate it. So we'll be watching for your book and you
Yay.
come back again after that so that we've got even more to
Yeah.
talk about. So thanks everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.